30 seconds away. Fifteen seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cue.
Good morning and welcome to the Wednesday, August 18th, 2021 Board of County Commission meeting. I'm Nicole Gibbs, Community Relations Specialist for the county. As of August 11th, 38.6% of all people in Sedgwick County are fully vaccinated and 42.7% have received at least their first dose. Of those eligible, so 12 years and older, 46.4% are fully vaccinated and 51.2% have received at least their first dose. Starting today, the Sedgwick County Health Department will begin providing a no-cost third dose of the Pfizer vaccine to people who self-attest to having a moderately or severe weakened immune system and who have previously received 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. If a person received the first and second dose of the Moderna vaccine, it is recommended they return to the location that they received Moderna. They may also check vaccines.gov and search for providers administering the Moderna vaccine near their location. The Sedgwick County Health Department only has the Pfizer vaccine available for a third dose. The Health Department continues to actively test for COVID-19 at the Sunflower Shelter located in Sedgwick County Park. We have seen a 68% increase over the last 2 weeks in testing. To increase access to COVID-19 testing, Sedgwick County Health Department expands its testing hours of the operation at the Sunflower Shelter at Sedgwick County Park, which is found at 6501 West 21st Street. New hours of operation are now from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Wednesday hours are 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Please remember, the Health Department continues to offer no-cost walk-in testing to all residents regardless of symptoms. You can also visit gogettested.com/Kansas to find locations for COVID testing near you. On August 25th at 6 p.m., we will hold our second public budget hearing for the 2022 recommended budget. This hearing will take place here in the Commission meeting room. Residents are invited to attend and provide feedback. If you can't make it to the hearing, comments may be left on the online public forum until 5 p.m. August 24th. Commissioners, today's agenda includes a resolution accepting the resignation of a District 5 Citizens Advisory Board member, a resolution appointing members to Chairman MEITZNER's Citizen Advisory Board, a resolution supporting the extension of AMTRAK services in our region, an update on the COVID-19 fiscal response to date, a resolution creating new Sedgwick County personnel policies and procedures, and a report of the Board of Bids and Contracts. With that, Chairman, I turn the meeting over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, fellow commissioners. Welcome to the Wednesday, August 18th, 2021, Sedgwick County Board of County Commission meeting. With that, Madam Clerk.
Invocation to be observed by a moment of silence. Please remain standing for the flag salute.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Lopez?
Present.
Commissioner Dennis?
Present.
Commissioner Howell?
Present.
Commissioner Cruz?
Present.
Chairman Meitzner.
Present. Next item, please.
Public agenda.
Commissioners, we received I think we had one email that we received yesterday that you had a chance to review. Is any comments or questions about the public agenda item email that we received?
Motion to approve.
I'll second that. Motion and a second to approve the email we received on the public agenda. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez? Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. And I understand that we did not have anybody sign up to address us on the public agenda in person, so we will move on to next item, please.
Appointments. Item A, accept the resignation of JERI Myers from the Sedgwick County Advisory Council on Aging and Physical Disabilities.
Mr. Papoon?
Mr. Chairman, Michael Penn, County Councilor. The first item under appointments today is the resignation of Ms. Myers from Commissioner HOWELL'S, Sedgwick County Advisory Council on Aging and Physical Disabilities, his position for that board. I ask that you accept the resignation.
Okay, Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to say thank you to JERI Myers. She is a tremendous individual, one of the sweetest people I've ever met, and she did a tremendous job running the Mulvane Senior Center, and she is just stepping away from a number of responsibilities, and this was on her list of things to step away from. So sadly, I'll have to see her go, but I respect her desires and wish her well, and want to just say thank you from the bottom of my heart for her service to Sedgwick County. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to accept the resignation.
Okay. Second? Motion and a second to accept the resignation. Any comments? Being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez? Commissioner Dennis? Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz? Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Next item, please.
Item B, resolution appointing members to the Sedgwick County 1st District Citizens Advisory Board.
Mr. Papoon?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Michael Penn, County Councilor. Previously, this board adopted a resolution creating a Citizens Advisory Board for District Number 1. Today, you have the resolutions in your backup appointing the various members to this advisory board. The names of the people that are going to serve on this board for the chairman are Jacqueline Kelly, Judah Craig, Drake Robinson, Amy Cox, Kendall Hirschberger, Dr. Stephanie Kuhlman, Valerie White, James Reed, Whitney Krager, and Daniel Bateman. We have created resolutions for all 10 of these members and ask that you approve the resolutions.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I did have a chance to visit with, there's 10 people nominated out of the 11 available, so there's still one spot that I reserved to be filled at a later date. I know personally about 3 of these, and the other 7 I've only met by telephone and interview, so I'm looking forward to this Citizen Advisory Board. We are going to meet at the Bel Air City Hall, their community room, on the 3rd Monday of each month in the evening, starting at 5:30. So our first meeting will be September 3rd Monday, whatever date that is. So with that, I'd like to make a motion. I hope the commission supports a motion to appoint these members to the Citizens Advisory Board. Second. There's a motion and a second. Any questions? I don't see any, so Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz? Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Next item, please.
New business, item C, resolution supporting the extension of AMTRAK services.
Mr. Papoon.
Mr. Chairman, you have before you a resolution supporting the extension of AMTRAK from Newton, Kansas down to Oklahoma City. Since this really is in kind of the form of a proclamation, I thought we'd read the resolution into the record, although it's very common to have resolutions of this nature to show support for a particular project, especially when there's action in Washington, D.C. Supporting such projects. Resolution of support by the Board of County Commissioners of Sedgwick County for expansion of Amtrak's passenger rail service in Oklahoma and Kansas. Whereas Amtrak has released the Amtrak Connects Us plan to grow rail service across America, and whereas the 2035 vision identifies expansion and enhancement of corridor routes that offer economically viable, frequent, reliable, and sustainable passenger train service, and whereas the 2035 vision proposes adding 160 additional communities to the national rail network, including extension of the Heartland Flyer line from Oklahoma City through Wichita to Newton, where it will intersect with the Southwest Chief, serving numerous other cities along the route in Kansas and Oklahoma. And whereas Amtrak has proposed 100% funding for the capital costs required for the redevelopment of this corridor, currently in the Federal Surface Transportation Reauthorization Act, and whereas Amtrak has identified an extension of the Heartland Flyer as an economically viable train for a connection with the Southwest Chief at Newton, Kansas, that will improve the performance of the national network. And whereas an extension of the Heartland Flyer between Oklahoma City and Newton would add the cities of Edmond, Guthrie, Perry, Ponca City, Arkansas City, Wichita, and Newton to the schedule. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of County Commissioners of Sedgwick County, Kansas, that Sedgwick County expressly supports the continuation of the Southwest Chief and the expansion of the Heartland Flyer lines. And send it back to questions to the commission at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, for reading that. For the commission and the public, all of those cities and those related counties and others associated with this resolution have been passing resolutions. We are very close to having this success story. If it's not quite at the finish line yet, but as it gets there as part of the transportation bill, it'll be, as I've talked to KDOT and ODOT, the intent is for this to be funded exclusively by AMTRAK, which takes the burden of financial obligations off of our shoulders. And so it's very important, as part of the resolution said, there's 160 projects around the country. So based on the efforts that we've made in the past years and current efforts, we want to keep our region in the forefront of Amtrak's decision tool. As soon as they get the full authorization, then they're going to go forward on projects over the next 10 years plus. So our effort is to make sure that we're in the top projects on their list, meaning top 5 or 10, so they can get started right away on this. It's got a lot of information about it. So if the public or the media wants further information, I'd be glad to talk to them. I know that Councilmember Cindy Claycomb is representing the city, and Kelly McElroy is representing. She's the city manager at Newton. She's been very involved. So I might ask our communication department there is a web link for any citizen can voice their opinion or make a support message to Amtrak, and I think it's just important that Amtrak keeps hearing from our region, because there'll be a lot of competing projects in these 160 projects. So ours is an easy one to do. We're not going over mountains or tunnels or have to go over any rivers, so and the tracks are already there. They just need to be improved. So with that, I tried to give you the elevator speech here on this project. And with that, I'd appreciate if the commission, if you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer. And if not, I'll make a motion that we support this resolution and get it publicly displayed to our national delegation and our Amtrak friends.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? I don't see any. So, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner?
Aye. Thank you again, Commission, for supporting this. Next item, please.
Item D, update on COVID-19 fiscal response.
Lindsay, your stack isn't quite as big as it's been in the past.
I'm taking a chance and I'm paring it down.
Okay. Cliff
We're
notes.
going to see if I can live with it or not. So take it easy on me.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Lindsay Poruso, your CFO. So, Commissioners, I sent you a note last night saying that we were going to cover 3 things today. This is all just one big receive and file. So the first thing we'll talk about is just our normal COVID spending update. Well, if you have any questions, we can talk through those. Then Brent will come to the podium to give you an update on the Community Navigator program, where we stand with that as we continue to make progress. And then once he wraps up that discussion, I'll come back up here so we can kind of talk through some timeline issues. So you are getting a handout now that is our current timeline. And we'll cover that and then cover some alternatives here in a bit. So, first of all, we'll do our COVID spending status. So, since the last time we talked, we're only up $1 million. And I say only because our grand total COVID spending to date, since this started in March of 2020, is $124,837,980. a truly staggering sum. So the $1.1 million increase that we have experienced since the last time I presented to you about a month ago is almost all in personnel and or temporary employment services. So it's basically making sure that the health department has staff, whether it be their own or other folks who are working on their behalf to do testing and vaccinations. And based on the COVID increase in the community, we do expect those costs to start going back up. If you recall, when we talked about this early in the year, we had an estimated cost of roughly $15 million to get us through June, with the expectation that at the end of June, COVID would be relatively died down, vaccines would be widespread in the community, and we would start being able to taper off those costs. Well, unfortunately, Delta has thrown us for a loop, and so we do expect those costs to go up. The other factor in this is, of course, that we do have ARPA funds, but ARPA procurement rules require us to go through a much more extensive procurement process. So our existing contracts for temporary employment services and things like that don't work. So we will be going through an RFP process to basically reestablish those contracts so ARPA can be spent. The reason I'm telling you this is because that means that until we get to that point and you all approve that contract through bid board, we are spending county general fund dollars. And so earlier this week within the finance budget, we reallocated $1 million from the economic development contractual budget to COVID-19 to pay invoices that we have and expect to receive through October. Because right now we have a total of $8 million remaining in contingencies. And of that $8 million, $3 million is earmarked for specific purposes, either public safety or technology. So we are doing our level best to get these procurement contracts done and to get them in front of you. We will start to just send those through a normal process. So you'll see them come through bid board. We won't have a special discussion like this for those, but it is important that you know that those will be coming, and we'll try and highlight always that those are ARPA funded contracts. So a little bit of a different approach than what we did with CARES, certainly not as quick and efficient, but we want to make sure we're not causing any problems for ourselves down the road or our taxpayers having to repay anything. So we have not changed with our CARES spending. We continue to have all of that funding committed, the 99.6. We continue to have a good status with the state of Kansas for the $9.3 million that they had allocated to us. And so we don't really have much new spending to report on from that perspective. Now, where do we stand with ARPA? Because I'm talking to you so much about we haven't spent it yet, but we know we've got $50 million in the bank. So just a quick update on the status. You all participated in conflict of interest training earlier this week. Finance staff have participated in procurement training. We're about to get some hefty uniform guidance training. I thought about bringing down a stack just so you could see all the documents, but we'll save that for a later date. We have ARPA positions that you all approved through that spending plan a few weeks ago, moving through the process to recruit, hire, and actually start that work. So we will start spending some ARPA funds there. We have established, with the help of ERP, a financial structure within our system. If you remember, I told you we have 66 different reporting categories that we're expected to share with the feds every quarter. And so they have worked with us so that we can streamline that process, hopefully a little better than we were able to with CARES. We do have our first report on ARPA to the feds. It's due August 31st, and it's what's called a performance report. This is where we're going to have to talk about how our initiatives are specifically targeting those folks who were most heavily impacted by COVID or were disproportionately impacted by COVID. We have to share the performance measures for our programs before, and as we go, we have to share how our programs are impacting that, and we will be expected to make course correction as we go if the performance measures are showing us that our programs aren't effective. So we obviously will keep you in the loop on that. We're working with departments, or will be shortly. We're getting some training ourselves later today on exactly what that needs to look like, and so we'll be sharing that with departments and then, of course, reporting back to you. We are in the midst of premium pay analysis. Departments were able to go to a webinar, view a webinar, and then were given some documentation that they had to produce, and they had a really short time frame to do it. They had about 2 weeks, but they got it done. We have a massive amount of data that has been communicated to our consultants who will now review it to make sure the documentation is adequate, to review for appropriateness and eligibility. The goal is to bring options to you for a vote on September 8th. Between now and then, after we get some data, we will talk with you about how that's looking and try to get any questions answered so that when we come and present to you, you're able to have that discussion and make a vote, with the goal, of course, of making a first payment in September, half of it, and then a second half payment in December. Now, of course, all of that is contingent on the data looking good, not having to go back and do a lot of follow-up, and making sure that you all have the information you need. So that can all change, but those are our target dates. We also, as I shared earlier, are working on RFPs for temporary agency services, as well as design for the renovation of this building associated with the court backlog. And we are working to establish contracts with our consultants so that we can use ARPA funds to pay for their assistance going forward. We are finalizing that community feedback, so we've talked about the internal needs survey, the external needs survey, and the focus groups that have happened. All of that data is being compiled, and Brent will be here on September 8th to give you a full report out on that. And then we'll also talk about how you want that information to be shared and with whom. We are fleshing out our internal processes for folks like the courts and DA to access the dollars that you approved back in last month. And then we continue to have several requests that come through for eligibility analysis. So that is your spending status update. I assure you we're keeping busy and are not bored. And I'm happy to answer any questions on this part. And if you don't have questions on this part, I'll turn it over to Brent.
Okay, Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. I got a question around PPE kits. So last year during CARES we had, so what is our plan to provide masks, or specifically masks, to the community for those who might not be able to afford them?
I don't know that we have a specific plan on that. Rusty, do you have anything from emergency management to update? Okay. I don't believe, based on what I understand from the state and from emergency management, there's not really a program that's funded right now to do that. Certainly that's something we can look into. We do have a $2 million contingency within ARPA funds. Of course, we'd have to go through an RFP process, but that's certainly something we could talk through. Do you have anything you want to add?
The only other thing I'd say is we do have current stock and are honoring requests as best we can to provide masks, and we'll try to keep stock moving forward and potentially use these ARPA dollars to continue that stock.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned ARPA positions. Is that the community navigators? What exactly does that encompass?
So that's a great question. I'm sorry for not being clear. Those are the actual positions that the county is hiring onto our staffing table. Okay. The community navigators most likely are going to be a contract situation, so it wouldn't be those folks. It's so we've talked about in finance, we have the ARPA grant administrator and a grant analyst. HR had some recruitment specialists. Emergency management and EMS both had some logistics positions. Fit testing, those are the types of positions I'm referencing, where we're trying to fill those today.
Okay. Yeah, those are absolutely necessary. I know you guys do a lot. So are you going to go into the community navigators? Is that what Brent's going to talk about?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May need Tim to answer my questions.
Okay.
I received a phone call the other day, and one of my constituents was a little bit concerned as they went out to the Sunflower Center out at Sedgwick County Park. And as we just got briefed, we've had to increase the number of hours, but the problem that they saw was that it's a very small shelter, and we have an awful lot of people going to get tested. A lot of those are positive. Some of them aren't positive, so they don't feel comfortable because we're crowding a whole bunch of people into one small area to get tested. So I just want to know what the future holds. I've heard that we're looking at other spaces, but how soon can we have something?
Well, good morning, Commissioners. Tim Cochran, Deputy County Manager. not even in the future, in the present, we have had brilliant interns go out and assess. We've got some consultants that have helped us assess, and so we've completely reconfigured the space that we have, because the reality is, quickly, we're not going to be able to find other space, so we're going to make better use of the space that we have. The other thing that we've added today, by now we should have queue lists up at that location as well. So people will have the option to wait in their car. We've just seen a huge increase in the volume in testing. We'd like people to remember that we're not the only testing option in town. And the Go Get Tested Kansas is an option that will help people find other testing options. But we have made significant changes to our workflow, and we think that we've addressed those problems so that people will be able to distance and be able to be in the comfort of their car if they need to be. Today's a big day. We'll see how it works because we've got extended hours. And we are looking for additional space. We just don't know that we'll be able to turn around additional space quickly, but we are making some significant changes at our location as we speak.
Good. And this is the first I heard that we were implementing queue list. Are we getting that out on our website also so that the public understands that they can sign up on queue list so that they can get an actual slot?
I think that we will do that after we go through today and we know what kind of an experience it's going to be for folks. But yes, we will, as soon as we've got it to where we're comfortable that it's working well, we'll roll that information out through our communications department.
Good. And the second question that I have, I know we purchased Panther machines so that we can do our own testing. WSU MDL Lab that we invested a lot of money in is also able to do testing. One of the other concerns this individual had when they called was that it looks like our Panther machines are turning the results back in about 2 days, where that if we could send it out to WSU MDL Lab, at least with the saliva test, that we could turn it around the same day. So how do I answer that?
We're using both, and right now it would appear that the normal instance is it turns around in 1 business day. So test today, your results are available tomorrow from the health department or through MDL. The other thing that we've discovered is that the desire for saliva tests is much lower than the desire for other tests, and so I don't know that really increases the time. It's just an anomaly that we've discovered that people aren't as interested in the saliva test as they are some of the other tests. But I think that right now, we're using both the MDL and the WSU and the Health Department lab, and generally we're turning stuff around in 1 business day. Now, if they come out after 1 o'clock on a Friday, it may be Monday before they get those results. But other than that, generally next day results should be available.
Okay. Have we asked the public why they would rather have this thing that goes all the way up to the back of your brain rather than a saliva test?
Well, we also have an oral swab, so we don't have to quite touch your brain to do that anymore. But I think much of it has to do with people just don't like to. Saliva is an unpleasant medium for people, and that's what we've experienced so far.
Well, I've had all 3, and I'll guarantee you the saliva is much easier than either one of the other 2. One of them will gag you, the other one why you get some kind of brain damage. So, very good. I appreciate the information. Thank you, Tim.
Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you. I know I asked you earlier, but I would just like to ask again and see if it's possible. Can we start doing testing on the weekends now that we're seeing such an uptick in the need for it?
That's another thing that we're working on right now. We are just like every other, most of the departments in the county and many other employers, we're struggling to find people to be able to fill slots. And so as soon as we have it adequately staffed, and we're also talking to our community partners to see if they can help us. Again, we're doing a significant amount of testing in the community. It would be nice if we could get some partners to help us with that as well. But we're working on that to try and find a Saturday option as well.
Okay. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can do 270 tests internally a day. Is that right?
The health department lab can process about 270 tests each day, yes.
How many are we getting average now?
We're over, this week we've been over 300, and so we're using not only the health department, but the MDL lab as part of our regular daily plan.
Okay, so anything over that 270, we're sending it to WSU?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to just say, I actually, when MDL was coming online, I went through the trouble of getting certified to take a saliva sample, and the comments I heard from people were just overwhelmingly thrilled with having a saliva sample over the nasopharyngeal swab. And I think I've been swabbed by that long probe, I think 4 times now, and it is unpleasant. So I have to tell you, I'm a little surprised by the comment about the saliva is not as popular. But anyway, that's beside the point. And I do think that WSU can do thousands of tests per day. So again, I don't think there's any limit for the community. Any low limit for the community getting tested. I think we can ramp that up as much as possible. And I think that weekends is certainly a good idea, and evenings is a good idea. I really want to just ask a question, though. I've had some comments from employees regarding the feds have recommended to employers, especially, they've given us ARPA money, but they've recommended that we provide a $100 incentive for vaccination or proof of vaccination. And I'm curious if the county is considering that, and if we are, then where are we on this idea? And if we're not, I guess why not?
We have discussed some incentive options. We're not ready to implement anything right now. Most of the money that we received initially that could have been used for incentives was from KDHE, and there were a lot of restrictions on things that were not allowed. And so most of those dollars were spent to provide grocery staples, and then we used the vulnerability index to help us determine where we would make those available. And we'll continue to use that model and explore other options, but we're not ready to roll out anything other than that right now.
Let me clarify my question. I'm actually referring primarily to employees first. I'm not sure about the community, but for employees, I think that's the feds were very specific about that. And I just asked Lindsay this morning through an email, and I think you said it would be allowable. But do you have any comments on my question as well? I mean, if it's allowable, I guess I'm curious as to why we wouldn't just, if every employee did this and it was, and we had 3,000 employees, it would be $300,000 out of our $50 million. So I think we've got the money.
So ARPA, it does say that it is permissible to do up to $100 incentives for employees and potentially community members. I think at this point, it would take some direction from the commission that there was interest in doing that, and we would be happy to start looking into how a program like that could work.
Well, I guess I just want to say for $300,000, I think it's something we ought to be talking about as commission, and I would probably support that. So thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you. I don't really have a big problem with the $100. The only question that I would have, I have heard from some large employers, and they've already incentivized their employees $100 to get the vaccine. They say it's a lot easier to pay $100 to a person and keep them healthy and keep them working every day than to have a whole bunch of employees that aren't working because they've got COVID. And so it was in their best interest to do that. So there are some folks that are being incentivized already. So I want to make sure that folks understand that we could be having people double dip on being incentivized. Also, I made a joke a little bit ago. I want to make sure everybody understands that nasal pharyngeal does not do any kind of brain damage. It's just uncomfortable as all get out. So please forgive me on that. One final question on that, though, is can't the MDL lab also do the nasal pharyngeal, or can they only do saliva?
We use them for all of our mediums, so that, yes, they can do the NP swab and the oral swab, and we use them for all the different mediums that we use.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And my only thanks for the presentation from both of you so far. And Lindsay, I'm just reminded that I did log on and watch the conflict of interest seminar that you had, and appreciate the consultant that came in. And it's a big reminder to us and to the public that this conflict of interest on the ARPA distribution of money is very important to be professionally mindful of that. I know that the meeting kind of also had some other things were a little bit off topic, but the conflict of interest portion was very good, and I just want you to know that I logged and watched, and thank you for having the lady come and present to us on that. It's very important. So
My
thank
pleasure,
you.
and thank you for saying that you watched it.
Yes.
Chairman, if I might, just a couple comments before we move on.
Yeah.
Regarding incentivization, we'll work something up and present it to commission, and if the commission chooses to use ARPA monies in that way, we will give you some options on that. And secondly, just a reminder on the testing component, and Tim alluded to it, the MDL testing has many outreaches within the community at large employers, including Sedgwick County, where employees can go on their work site, do the saliva test, and it will get distributed to MDL. So it's not only the health department's park site at 21st and Ridge, but there are many operations within the county facilitated last year by WSU to allow employees to go to their work sites to get tested using saliva testing. Just want to remind people of that as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're on to the Part B of C of ABC. Thank you. Ready?
You bet.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Meitzner. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Brent Shelton, your Deputy CFO. And this morning, as Lindsay mentioned, I'm going to give you a brief overview and summary of our progress or the process that we are going through to establishing some community navigation program. So just at the core of what this is, and in its simplest terms, community navigators are going to be designed to connect those with needs to those with resources. Whether it's individuals, businesses, nonprofits, local governments, and that's kind of where the simplicity ends, because every one of those four that I just mentioned could be on either side of that ledger. You can be a business that needs employees. You can be someone that has an impediment to reentering the workforce. Nonprofits that both are grantors and maybe want to apply as a grantee for funds. So the idea with the community navigators is going to probably be several-fold. One is to meet some immediate needs that we have determined as part of our needs assessment processes that we've gone through, and then to move forward as more buckets of money from ARPA or from the infrastructure bills or other federal resources become available. So I guess some examples, and as we began to go through that needs assessment, those focus groups, there was also a survey done by the Workforce Alliance of everyone that has accessed unemployment benefits since the beginning of the effects of the pandemic. The number one thing that we've been hearing is that workforce is the issue. It's an issue for businesses trying to hire people, for people wanting to reenter the workforce that have certain impediments. The jobs aren't paying enough, or they don't have childcare for second or third shift, or they don't have access to transportation. Different needs have emerged. And at the same time, we've got some resources available through some agencies, Workforce Alliance, WSU Tech, that can help get people ready to reenter the workforce. So how do we match those two together? So of our immediate need being workforce and the things that go around workforce, we're going to convene a meeting, it should happen in the next few days, of some of these folks with resources. A couple that I just mentioned, as well as maybe a Small Business Administration and others, to begin to craft how their resources could work to meet those needs, and then how we establish community navigators so that information can go out. We talk about ARPA funds, and the county, we've got our direct allocation, but within that, within the whole bucket of the $1.9 trillion in ARPA are a number of other federal resources. So I envision community navigators helping connect a small nonprofit with some other resources that are available. Or maybe we provide technical assistance so that they can help access those funds. So, as I mentioned earlier, in its simplest form, we have needs, we have resources. How do we get them together? And that's what community navigators are going to try to do. But then it takes several different forms. So we're beginning now to bring the resources together to see what they have available. and then we'll stand up RFPs so that we can reach out to community agencies that can contract with us to provide navigators. Maybe it takes the form of employees. We just don't know for sure yet until we see what's there to meet the needs that we've identified at this point. So we're taking that next baby step in terms of what resources are there compared to the needs that have been identified at this point in time. So I think we'll be meeting immediate needs as they pertain to workforce, and then begin to connect those potential agencies with those federal resources. So we're going to be trying to put together knowledgeable folks that are trusted within different communities where we've seen specific acute needs, and then be nimble enough to continue to change as the situation evolves over the next several years. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. Commissioner Cruz?
Chairman, thank you, Brent.
You bet.
A couple of questions. First one being, how many people do you think that this program realistically will have working within it?
It's hard to say at this point in time, just because until we identify what those resources and begin to pull those things together. One of the things that, I guess one of the terms that we've heard is braided funding. So for instance, WSU Tech has received funds through ARPA. Workforce Alliance has received funds. We've received funds. We can pool those resources for one bigger program. So the $500,000 that you've allocated to community navigators goes a long way to beginning to get that put together. But Workforce Alliance can identify and establish a training program that meets the needs of a business, and then as navigators are finding people that would like to re-enter the workforce, we pull them together. I think it's going to be multifaceted, and to give you an exact number of people that would be involved is difficult at this time. I'll have a better idea when I speak to you again on the 8th of September with more information as we begin to pull some things together.
Okay, and so how will this program be accessible to the public? Is this an online portal that so when we receive questions, because I've already received a lot of questions because I've been talking about this within the community, what's the easiest way for a community member to access this?
I think as we had discussions about this, we've envisioned exactly that, an online portal, maybe a phone number like the 211 number with United Way where you can call and ask questions, and those folks get connected to resources. It could be as personalized as having people with boots on the ground going into neighborhoods where there's high unemployment or high needs that have been identified, because we've identified by zip code some of this information, so they can go in and talk to people individually. Were you employed? Do you wish to be re-employed? What do you need? So that we can begin to then to connect those needs with those resources. So I think it's going to be a multifaceted marketing approach in order to get the information out.
Okay, so I want to throw out a scenario here. I live across the street from an Oxford house, and that is a home that is designed for men who want to get off whatever addiction they are struggling with. And I had a gentleman approach me on my porch, and we've seen throughout this pandemic a rise in alcohol sales. I mean, that's documented. He had mentioned he has fellow friends that wouldn't want to get off alcohol, and they don't have a ride to AA. And so he approached me with, I want to provide a transportation service to those who saw an increase in alcohol use during the pandemic, but they just don't have a way to get to AA. Would that sort of program qualify for any of these funds?
I think to the extent that there's a COVID connection with the increase in alcohol consumption during the pandemic. That's a need that's been identified. I don't know at this point why it would not qualify.
Okay, so that's just an example. I know that we're not going to make any promises right now, but so for me, I could send him to this online portal. If he doesn't have access to service, if he doesn't have access to the internet, there would be a phone that he could call. But if someone like him has never really put together a program, would this navigator be able to walk through, or would they need to come to the navigator with, how many rides they think they're going to do a month? I mean, have all of this laid out. Like, what is the process going to be? Because I can gather it's going to be time consuming for some of these programs to develop. But if someone's never had the training on how to access federal funds or local funds, is that something that the community navigator will provide?
I think I think I could see that taking two tracks. One is they have a need for transportation, and here's an immediate way to fill that need with an existing resource. If that's not there, then the community navigator could possibly connect them with some sort of technical assistance to begin a process. There's a bucket of money here that might fund that. This is how we would access that bucket of money. I guess the caveat is, if it was something that the county wanted to fund with ARPA dollars, we can't provide that technical assistance. We can't help people apply for our money, but we could help people apply for other resources.
Okay. So the community navigators you're going to go out for RFP for that? Is that what you said?
That's the plan, right?
And so what is the time frame that you feel is appropriate to have this up and running?
I would hope to have requests for proposals out in October, and then begin to get that, as those responses come in, we begin to stand the program up this year. You're going to hear in just a minute some potential timelines and things, but because this will be connecting people, connecting folks with needs to those folks with resources, this is kind of the precursor to all the different projects and programs that we'll be implementing.
Okay. So for full disclosure, and the whole conflict of interest, I get approached a lot about programs. I mean, I'm out in the community every single day. So, these and I'm looking at Lindsay specifically, like these conversations that I'm having, I am completely 100% transparent. They have to go through the process. But I will walk through scenarios with people who have never applied for these funds before, because they're coming to me, to ask for help. So I do my best to send them in the right direction, but having a conversation on my porch with someone who's approached me, I hope that that's appropriate. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, it was on my porch.
Okay. Thanks, Brent. I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
All right. Hello again. It's been so long. So now we get to probably one of our less fun portions of the conversations. We're going to talk about timeline. So obviously we have been working on a track to try and move quickly with these funds. We know that we have the money in the bank. We know that you all are getting regular questions, and there are needs in our community. And so we had wanted to act somewhat quickly, obviously within the rules, to try and get this done. So what you have at your seats and what is pulled up here is the timeline that was last updated about a month-ish ago, based on what we knew at the time, associated with the spending plan that you all had approved for urgent needs, or were going to be asked to approve. And then also with the thought that we would be able to partner with the city, other cities, the state, to offer programs, and that we all were kind of moving in sync with that. So what you can see is that so far we are on track with everything that's on this calendar. We have our needs assessments, we have our urgent spending plan information. We're going through staff training. We're beginning to talk about what a grant portal would look like for ARPA. We're beginning to have all of these conversations. And so you can see that on this, in terms of August 2021, we are well on track. But since we had this conversation a month ago, we've had a few factors that have come into play that now are making us want to talk with you about the possibility of tapping the brakes just a bit. So I want to talk through what those factors are, and then we don't need a vote or anything from Commission today, but some discussion and direction on whether you want us to continue on the status quo path or whether you're okay with tapping the brakes a bit would be really useful to us. So with that said, we had the opportunity to speak with Recovery Office officials last week who were able to give us some great information. And I actually learned through that conversation that the State Spark Committee is actually revived. It looks a little different in this round than it did the last round. We do have 3 members from the Wichita area on the 7-member executive committee. So that's certainly a good sign that our interests will be well represented at the state level. But in watching their last meeting on July 15th, there had been a proposed process and structure that would be used along with a timeline. And there was some discomfort from a few of the members at the State Spark Committee level. And so they don't yet have a process or structure defined. And so that has obviously, just like it would for us, put things back a bit in terms of what their anticipated timeline would be. So what we don't know right now is exactly what the state's process is going to be to release information. But one of the conversations that we had basically also unveiled the fact that just like we're talking about conflict of interests and not being able to help the people we're giving money to, we may not actually be able to work with the state in the way that we originally envisioned, to sit down at the same table and craft programs together. What it seems may be more likely and more efficient from the state's perspective is potentially for them to stand up their own programs and allow folks across the state to apply. An example that I'm thinking of is like the Emergency Rental Assistance Program that's being operated across the state. There's one single resource for the state that's covering all of that. So that may be a program or something like that that's offered for citizens, for businesses to apply. And we also saw that with some business assistance last year. So that's possibly one track the state would take, interacting directly with people who are getting funding. Another option may be that it could look like what we got with our Spark funding, the $9.3 million that the state gave us, where we become a subrecipient and they give us money and we have to follow rules and report back to them. So that would make it very challenging for the state to sit down and partner with us. Then when you think about the fact that all 105 counties received direct Spark funding, many of the large cities receive funding directly. The state's administering funding through what are called non-entitlement units. They weren't large enough to get money directly from the feds. The state is having to disperse those funds. So they're managing all of that too. So it may be also a capacity issue where we're not able to just sit down with the state and operate programs like we may have originally wanted to. We know the city of Wichita is still in the process of determining how they want to use their funds. I know that there's a lot of discussion happening there. Obviously, if we can have opportunities for you all to get together and talk through that, I know that's been something that's been mentioned as something that's desired. That's something we want to take a look at, but that also takes time to collaborate and get elected official bodies together and make that good use of time. As Brent mentioned, there are still a lot of other buckets of funding that were approved through that massive American Rescue Plan Act. Our consultants have told us they are confident that that money is there. It's going to be there. It's not going anywhere. But there's likely some cooperation at the federal level that's happening between agencies to make sure they're not stepping on each other's toes, that there's not conflicts in programs that are happening. And so there's still a lot of funding out there for things that we are very interested in, like behavioral health or substance abuse or even capital type needs. But we don't know what those buckets will be, and we don't know how we will be able to access those. And then finally, This is still the funniest thing that I've seen yet, but I'm a giant nerd. We still don't have the final rule, right? We only have the interim final rule. And so we are still waiting to know the lay of the land. We had heard originally that 30 days past when we were supposed to turn in our questions, which was July 16th, that we would have that within 30 days. Well, that has come and gone, and apparently there have been a tremendous volume of questions and requests that have come into Treasury. And so now what we're hearing from our professional association is we don't really know what the timeline is on when we'll get that guidance. And so all of these things are kind of coming together in a way that says maybe we ought to tap the brakes a bit, wait and see what the state will do, what programs will be offered, because we know we can't duplicate funding, we know we can't double dip. So maybe we can see what the state will do, what other buckets will be, and then use our funding to try and fill the gaps where nothing else is going to be there, but we know there's a need. So obviously we are happy to stay on this track, and we can set up county programs and deal with whatever may come. That's certainly a legitimate option. Or we can maybe tap the brakes a bit and give you guys regular updates on what we're hearing, and come up with a revised timeline, although a lot of that is dependent on what others do. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any dialogue or discussion you all will have.
Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. Do we know, you said, how many people are on the state Spark committee?
There are 7.
And is there a timeline as to when they're going to meet?
I would assume any day now. I have not gone out. I meant to go out and look, and I apologize, I didn't, to see when their next meeting was. But since they just met last on July 15th, there was some direction to go back and meet with each of the members individually to get preferences, compile information, and come back soon. So I would expect that really to be any time now.
Okay, and remind me, are these open meetings?
Yes, and they actually are. If you go out to the state's COVID page, there are recordings of all of these meetings, copies of the presentations that they've done. So all of that information is available. It is a bit tricky to get to that, so if you're interested, let me know. I'm happy to send you the link.
That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Okay. And last time on the Spark Committee, Secretary Lorenz was the person leading it. Is she doing?
She has stepped down, and it is now DeAngela Burns-Wallace is the new secretary. I think from what I'm hearing, much of the recovery office was kind of borrowed for CARES. They kind of borrowed from other areas of the state. Now those folks are expected to go back to their, the jobs they were hired to do, and they're hiring specific staff to do this work now.
Well, it seems, my observation, and based on your message yesterday and your presentation today, that it might be more responsible for us to pause, keep working. Seems like every day, every week, you get smarter and more knowledge. So
I get more confused every week.
Well, and you transfer the confusion down.
I sure do.
Down to us also.
Absolutely.
So, but that's just my thought, because something tells me, my stomach just says it. I'm nervous that we might do something and find out, oh man, the state could have done, or especially since we're talking in the Sedgwick County. I've had 3 or 4 meetings with cities within the county about what they want to do, and they're asking to cooperation or not. And of course, direct them to let you all know what you want, as Commissioner Cruz has said. But that's at the city government level, not just an individual or a business. So love to help. I mean, we got to help our whole county, obviously. And I'm just nervous that something might happen that we could have been better served for the citizens and the community if we pause and watch a little bit while we're still taking steps forward, however that means. Kind of like the final.
Right.
Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate the update. We've got until 2024 to spend this money. So I think that you're making a very good recommendation that we kind of pause and make sure that we were working with other organizations. If you remember back when we had the en banc with the city of Wichita, one of the things that I recommended at that time was that we get together with some en bancs, not just with Wichita, but with other large communities and small communities throughout Sedgwick County to make sure that we're working with them so that we can make the best decisions possible for the ton of money is coming in to Sedgwick County. All the school districts have money in addition. So we need to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts. We're not all doing the same thing. And I think a pause to make sure that we're doing this the right way. And there's not a rush. I mean, we don't. Last time there was a rush. We had to spend it by the end of December. This time there's not a rush. So I concur with your recommendation. Thank you.
Any other comments? I don't really see any, so if that helps you a little bit with the guidance, thanks a bunch for all the presentation, Brent and Lindsay. Appreciate it.
Thanks for bearing with us. And Commissioners, can I ask that you receive and file this report, please?
I'll make a motion that we receive and file.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other comments? Being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Next item, please.
Item E, resolutions creating new Sedgwick County personnel policies and procedures.
Good morning, Commissioners. As Sheena makes her way to the podium, I just want to introduce the two policies we're going to discuss today. Commissioners, a few months ago I sent you an email, and I sent it to leadership team as well, talking about efforts that we need to incorporate as a county to improve situations of our employees. And it focused on four main categories. One was pay, the second was training and relationship building, the third was environment, and the fourth was the ability for employees to grow within their positions. The two policies today, and you will begin to see as a commission, we will begin to roll policies over the next several weeks and months directed at these four items. The two policies today deal directly with relationship building and also with pay. The first policy is a dispute resolution policy that staff has crafted. It is a new policy that goes above and beyond the county's existing grievance policy that we've had in place for a number of years. The grievance policy was there for employees to use if there was a job action taken against them that they wished to dispute or take a stand against. The policy we're talking about today is larger than that, more broad sweeping than that, and is designed it's a multifaceted approach to resolve differences within the organization in a healthy and thoughtful way that is a two-way communication in nature, and it is a safe environment. So Sheena Schmutz is our HR director. She will present this policy. We would ask that commission comment on and potentially take a vote if that is the commission's will. The second policy is a bonus pay policy. This is, again, a new policy. We don't have an existing bonus pay policy within Sedgwick County. It is a trial policy to determine if the use of signing bonuses is an effective way to bolster and recruit workforce in areas that have large numbers of openings of specialty positions with no clear pipeline of applicants. It includes, the prototype today includes emergency communications, CommCare specialty positions, and building maintenance positions, which involve the trades. All areas we're having difficulty finding applicants to fill openings. Not to mean that it would be the exclusive list. We clearly have issues in corrections in EMS, which we'd also want to analyze and study. And if this works, perhaps bring that under this policy as well and bring that back to you for consideration. So those are the two policies we'd like to talk about today, and I'd like Sheena to start with dispute resolution policy, and we'll go from there.
Okay, and I think for the commission, I think if we're going to adopt either one of these two, we'll take them separately. So we'll cover one and then discuss and motion or not, and then we'll go to another one. So anyway, Sheena, thank you. I know you've been working on this for a long time. So
Yeah,
welcome.
I will tell you, a lot of people have been involved with the creation of these policies. Thank you, Tom, for that introduction. The first policy we would like to introduce, again, is the dispute resolution. And this is designed to resolve conflicts between employees or employees and the organization in a manner that is safe for all parties and, of course, free of retaliation. And we have stated that within the policy. Within dispute resolution, it is a 3-step process, and the first step, again, depending on what the issue is that the parties are looking to resolve, we would ask that they try to do that at the departmental level, whether that's between the employees or between the employees with a supervisor. If a resolution cannot be met, the second step would be to come to HR, and we would provide guidance to those parties on how to resolve the issue at hand. That could be through a third-party facilitator. It could be through a neutral facilitator within the organization. We would use what we call our MEET model, or we would send it back to the department where possibly the division or department director would sit in as that facilitator and help the department or the employees work through the issue. The third step, if no resolution is met, is to set both parties down with a panel from the leadership team, which is defined within the policy, and have the leadership team come up with a resolution for those parties. We feel like this gives the chance for all of the parties involved to voice what is going on. We want them to clearly state what their conflict is and what their resolution would be for those issues. So again, we are suggesting this as just a dispute resolution. We know that every situation is a little bit different, so the policy is broad, and we want to give a little bit of leeway to those parties involved to help give them a path for that resolution. And stand for any questions.
Well, thank you. I know that we've all been briefed on this before, rather extensively to dissect. I'm really glad, I don't know if I caught it the first time, but at the end of number 6 on record keeping, I'm encouraged that this whole, whatever the dispute may be with the employee, that the records are kept at HR and not separate, and they're separate from the employee's personnel file.
That is correct.
So I would hope that would help provide a comfort level for an employee that really feels what's the impact on my personnel file. To have that separate, I think is a really good touch. So, and of course the steps that you outlined are nice as well. But anyway, you've got a couple of questions here.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure who is first. Commissioner Howell? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. You said there was a lot of people involved in creation of these policies. Can you describe the process by which we developed these and who was involved?
There's a lot of discussion with the leadership team, and also a lot of discussion within HR personnel as how we could accommodate this process.
Okay, when you say we're leadership team, that's actually defined in the policy. There's 7 members.
Yes, sir.
And just so everyone understands, it's the Chief Human Resources Officer, the Chief Financial Officer, it'd be Lindsay, I guess, the Chief Information Officer, the Assistant County Manager of Administrative Services, the Assistant County Manager, Deputy County Manager of Public Services, and the County Manager. So the department heads have not seen this necessarily unless they went and looked at the agenda since it was
Yes.
released last Friday. And they've not had any chance to weigh in. And the public, again, also has no awareness of this unless they went and looked at the agenda since Friday. Would that be fair?
Yes.
I just, I'm a little concerned about the, we talk about it being inclusive and trying to, hear many voices type of policies. And I am concerned that out of the more than 40 departments that this would apply to across our organization, that they've not had a chance to read this and to weigh in. And I'm looking at some of the other governing bodies out around the state and in this area. These types of policies sometimes would be posted 30 days prior to adoption, and we might hear from employees, hear from the public, hear from directors, and make minor amendments to these before we would adopt them. And again, if we would make significant changes, we might want to even reset the clock back and give them another 30 days. But to the extent that our directors have not seen this yet, I'm a little concerned that this is and our employees as well. I'm a little concerned that this changes, I think significantly changes that. And generally, I think it's very positive. So I'm I'm not against the idea of having a dispute resolution policy, but I am concerned that the details in here need to be understood by everyone because they're going to be held to this. Let me give you a couple of examples. For example, we talked about HR down in procedures under 5B. It talks about you may do three different things. You have three options. And I guess my thought would be, why wouldn't the employee have some input as to which of those three would be used? That might be a good way to improve this.
That would be part of the discussion when it comes to HR, as we understand the problem. We recognize that, again, depending on what the issue is that the employee's trying to find resolution on, it might be best to, again, use that internal neutral facilitator or go outside. It's just a fine line of understanding what the issue is.
But I guess my point is I think the employee ought to be part of that conversation, and I think they ought to have a way to help determine that decision. I think that their input is necessary.
Understood.
For example, I mean, I don't think this is something I would expect to happen, but let's just say the organization is wrong in some situation and the employee happens to be right. And maybe it's a dispute between the employee and the organization. I think they may want to go to an outside arbitrator potentially, but I can see how people on our side of the equation may not really want that to happen. So just to give that employee that option, I think would be an improvement in this policy. And then it talks about the leadership resolution hearing. It says that there would be three people out of the seven I just mentioned a minute ago. Three of those folks would come together to create to put up a leadership resolution hearing. My question would be, who picks the three?
What we have discussed on that is if the issue was involving a department, that person would not be on the panel. Other than that, we would have conversation with the manager on who would be on that panel.
And again, I'm a little concerned about the fact that this is something that, again, if we had something that we were doing incorrectly, I would have some concerns about whether or not that process is as good as it should be, I think. Then you mentioned through this policy the term the employee relations specialist. I don't know who that is. It's not defined in the definitions. Who is that person?
Her name is Isabella Hatfield, and she's actually in the audience with us today.
All right, good. I think we might want to clarify who that person is because I did not know that was, I mean, not by name, but certainly I didn't know the role of that person. Is that her entire job?
Yes.
Okay, good. You mentioned that the hearing will be closed to the public, and I'm curious if the employee wants to audibly record the conversation, are they able to do that?
I would have no issue if an employee recorded that.
I think we need to clarify that in the policy because under Kansas law, they have a right to record any conversation they're party to. And I think this might be one of those things where they would want to have a record of what's been said and what they said and what was said to them. I think that that would be helpful to the employees to have that option. And then I went and looked at like the machinist union dispute resolution policies, and one thing that they do that this one apparently doesn't want is they are allowed to call witnesses. If there's a witness to whatever the dispute is, why would we not want to hear from that witness? It seems to me that would be a good thing to bring in another voice. If it's a he said, she said situation, we would want to have a witness if there's one available.
I think the goal of this policy is to really address some of the lower level conflicts. If we have situations that rise up to policy violations, that's where we would have our employee relations specialist do an investigation, and she is going to interview witnesses on that part.
I know that may be the intent. I guess I'm just saying I don't know why we would not allow someone who had information relating to the dispute, have them come forward if one of the two people or he says two or more people, if one of them knows there's information out there, I would just want to say I think we ought to include that option. Again, going back to manager, you said this is a union-like employee protection policy. Well, in the union, they're allowed to call witnesses if they have information that relates to the dispute that's going on. So I think that if we're going to use that term, we ought to allow that employee to call witnesses if necessary.
Yeah, a couple things. I think the intent of this policy would be for employees or groups of employees who have information on whatever the topic is would surely be welcome at these kinds of meetings to talk about that. So that's the first thing. Sheena forgot to mention also that in the review of this policy, this went before the Organizational Policy Review Committee, which is a committee made up of 13 or 14 members, and it touches all departments and divisions within the county, including the row offices and the Sheriff's Department have representatives on that committee. That committee also vetted this policy. So in addition to the leadership team, which Sheena alluded to, this was went before Policy Review Committee for discussion. Thank you for the comments, Commissioner. I think these were all good ideas. And whatever we roll, I don't know that we ever try for the perfect policy. We try for a policy that is good, and we roll it. And if there's issues or things that come up, I always tell people these are not etched in bronze or granite. These are words on paper. We can easily go in and modify, change, and update. Policies are not meant to be stagnant. So I think this was the staff's effort to roll in front of the commission an idea, understanding it's not perfect and probably could be improved upon as we roll it, as we see how it operates. This is a brand new policy, it's not a revision, creating something out of thin air here, basically. So I appreciate the comments. We're taking notes, and I think that there's nothing I've heard so far that I think would
Good, I'm glad to hear that. And then one of my final concerns is this. It says at the very end of this, it says the decision of the hearing panel shall be final. It seems to me that if someone feels like they have, again, been unfairly treated, I want to give them every option possible. I would invite that person at that point. I don't know that it would ever get to this point, but let's just say it did get to this end point and they felt like they were treated unfairly or disrespectfully, or maybe there was, in their minds, retribution, retaliation that was mixed into this in some way. Not saying that's true, but let's just say that they feel that way. Why would we not invite them to essentially give them, I guess, access to the grievance board or to the Board of County Commissioners to bring the issue up for even, and I guess maybe even a final review. Seems to me that they ought to have that option if they ever got to that point. And Lord willing, it would never get to that point. But I just want to make sure that every employee understands we want to give them as much due process as possible. And the idea of the grievance board, by the way, I'm still not completely happy with how that's developed. I think the grievance board needs to have some disinterested people. If the grievance board is basically high-level county managers and directors or elected officials that come together, then I think there's a possibility of bias. And I would love to have disinterested people weigh in on this, almost like a judge. I mean, think of a judge or a courtroom setting. The reason the judge is able to make a decision is because he's disinterested in the issue. And I think that's part of the issue of due process. When you have people who have allegiance or loyalty to anything going on there, then the argument might be that there's not a pure process of due process. And so I'm a little concerned about that. I would love to see us set this back for 30 days, give the directors a chance to weigh in, give our employees a chance to weigh in, and then let's bring it back up. And then finally, because this is a new policy, I think on any new policy, we ought to give ourselves a sunset that says we force ourselves to come back and review whether the policy is working or not and re-adopt it for permanent placement in our policy book. But I think we ought to put a sunset on this. It forces us to come back and review whether it's working or needs to be amended in some way. Thank you, Chairman.
I might comment on that. Sure. Commissioner, we try to review all policies every 2 years within the county. So we do have I don't know, we have to necessarily sunset this particular policy. We should look at all policies within the county over a series of time, which that's part of the role of the Policy Review Committee, is every once in a while they would bring back policies for germane review. So thank you for that.
And if I may, you will be seeing coming forward a revision of the grievance policy as well. So we are trying to give some clarity and guidance on that as well. One thing I wanted to add is, maybe a few examples of where we might use this dispute resolution policy. If an employee has a dispute with their new work schedule, this would be a good platform where they could talk with their supervisor in regards to their work schedule. And if that didn't work, then possibly coming to HR and, again, having that internal facilitator help them find a resolution on that. Another example would be an employee has a conflict with a fellow coworker about loud music in the background. That's an example of how we would apply this policy. Or even if an employee or a group of employees have questions about a new departmental policy, we would encourage them to walk through these steps. Now, with that example, we know that HR will probably get involved more quickly than using step one. But we define all of those as being very similar where we could work through this process.
Okay. You got a couple other comments.
Sure.
And I know we're taking notes about but again, one commissioner is not driving this whole bus. It's all five of us. So as you take notes, just note that we all need to be able to weigh in and for the final outcome. Okay. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to see this. I know that we've kind of been talking about it for a while, and so I appreciate the work that's been done thus far. Just a couple of questions. The one thing that I've heard most frequently is a fear of retaliation.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we plan to address that? How do we plan to create a safe place for people to actually use this form?
That's a great question, and I know we've talked about that before. Part of this is we really want to just market it in that way that this is a safe environment. It's not about retaliation. It's not going in your personnel file, and that's part why we want both parties to come with what the conflict is and what their resolution would be and agree upon that. The other piece is if an employee feels like they are being retaliated against, that they need to notify someone. It's hard for us to know about retaliation if it's not being told to us.
I also want to comment on that, Commissioner, because I've heard the same complaints. We mentioned retaliation in this policy twice, once at the beginning and once at the end. When the commission, or if the commission approves this, we would immediately take this back and train on it, and part of that training to department heads and supervisors would be, this is a no retaliation policy, clearly. It has to have a safe place for employees to go for this to work at all. And so we would cover that with supervisors, we would cover that with employees. And this is the kind of policy, and I think we've talked about this before, this is the kind of policy that we would want to distribute to employees and not just have them read it, we would want to have them read it and initial it and record that so we know that they have received the information, understood the information, and been able to ask questions if they had questions over the information. So how we would roll this particular policy and many of these personnel types of policies which talk about intercommunications, we would want to roll that very thoroughly after the commission approves whatever version we're going to approve. So,
can you specifically define retaliation?
An action taken against an employee because they brought an issue forward. Okay. Retaliation can take many different forms.
Okay. So when someone is coming in for their first day and they go through all of the HR things, they're told, they sit for a whole day and get all of the forms and insurance and all of that. Being a new employee at places, it's overwhelming your first day of everything that's thrown at you. So how do we plan, because this is very important to the success of employees and to the health of this organization, how do we plan to tackle this within the first, not only on the first day, but reiterate it through the first coming weeks of someone's employment?
So this year will be just a little bit different. We'll send information out and they'll have X amount of days to acknowledge that they've read and understood the proposed policy. Moving forward, we have a new learning platform coming out in 2022, and we can put information like this on an annual reminder or an annual training for an employee. So that way they are constantly reminded of the process.
Okay. So you mentioned employees will sign, but we'll have directors and managers and everybody be aware of our no retaliation policy.
Yes, all employees, including me, will sign.
Okay. So then, how do we plan to advertise this so that there is a reminder in every single station, so that someone can access it if they do need to use it?
Once this is passed, we'll work with communications on getting information out to employees.
Okay.
I would also mention, Commissioner, the best example I can think of is when we roll certain IT security policies, which are critical to the organization, it is handled in the same way. In other words, a policy rolls, it is given to you at onboarding too. It is clearly an important policy because you have to acknowledge and initial it. Not all policies are built this way. This kind of policy would take on that kind of connotation where it's so important that you read it and initial it and acknowledge that you understand it. That's part of how we would market this.
Okay, so as a commissioner who receives a lot of communication from employees, what is the appropriate way to handle employees coming to commissioners to resolve conflicts?
You would be able to refer them to this policy and process, and we'll get information online for them.
Okay, and one final question. The Policy Review Committee is made up of who again?
Tim is the chair of it as the deputy manager, but it is made up of every division within the county as represented. We have representatives from all three row offices, sheriff and DA. So it is meant to be a inclusive group that looks at these policies, makes recommendations, and then before it gets to either you or me, they get a chance to look at it. So it was meant to touch every facet of the organization, including all divisions.
Okay, so divisions meaning they were like managers? What's the level of person on this policy review committee?
There are division heads and trying to think, is there a department head on there?
Let him.
I don't know off the top of my head.
It is a cross-section of the organization. I don't know that we have any line-level staff that participate. Most of them are people that have experience in reviewing, developing, and implementing policies. And so we've got some department heads, we've got some deputies and assistants, but a full cross-section of the organization.
Well, a full cross-section of the organization, I guess in my mind, would be not just managers and not just division heads. It would be, you know, you could have, I wouldn't say entry-level folks, help me, but it would be frontline workers. So how is this policy review committee selected?
The original, and this was 3 or 4 years ago when we stood this up, each elected official was, for example, asked to provide a member, and they would provide a member. Each division head was asked to provide a member, and then they would provide a member. I might mention that separate and distinct from this discussion, the county used to have, many years ago, an employee council. Commissioner Lopez and I have had some discussion on this as well. We are looking at that option as well as a separate standalone policy in addition to these other policies as a way to maybe bridge that gap of what you're concerned about today. We didn't necessarily want to make that part of this policy because we see that as a standalone policy, which would be an employee group elected by their peers who would meet and discuss many things, and maybe they would become involved in policy implementation or at least policy review in the future. So that's something we're taking a look at as well.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you. Well, that's kind of right where I was going to, is I want to make sure that our employees feel like they are being represented and it's not just management level and above, because I think that's where a lot of conflicts are going to come in. If they are untrusting of their management team, how are they going to be trusting of other management teams to come in and really work their dispute? So I know you said that looking into what I had brought up, I know there was a group in the past that had 12 or 13 members. It was union-like. They were able to be elected into those roles for a couple of years or however long that was at the time. And then they had a seat at the table in all of these discussions, whether it's policy or, they helped, or they had a seat when you guys were talking about what day to take off for, like Columbus Day or the day after Thanksgiving. And so I do think because we don't have unions at the county, which could be a whole nother discussion, right? But if we give our staff peers that they feel like they can trust and go to, and then they can go in and have these conversations too and disputes, so they do feel like that level is taken care of, because other organizations our size have unions. I mean, that's who they would go to, and we don't have that option. So I think it's really important. I know it's not in this policy. I would love to see it be part of this somehow if possible, just so our staff knows that what they're saying and what they're going through is taken seriously from that level, and not just from management looking down and saying what it should be. So that's where my only concern is with this. I did ask a couple of people who have been here for a long time about the MEIT model, because we had talked about that, and you said, people in the past would know what that is, but they didn't know what that was. So I do think it's going to be important that however we put this out, it's really clear what we're expecting here, because it wasn't as well known as I think people might think it would be. So those are only my two things. I would love, if we put this off for 30 days, just so we can have a better input from our staff and from more than just the management that's been involved in this so far, if that's, the will of the board. But I do think that's a good idea. So thank you so much for all your work on this.
The only other thing I'd want to mention on top of that, Commissioner, is several departments have employee councils within their departments. So when we create the overall employee council organizationally, it would probably be made up, or perhaps could be made up, of members who are already representing groups within those work areas. Many departments do have employee councils within their shops. We morph that together.
Okay. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of quick ones. The ethics policy we have not passed yet for the employees, does that tie into this in any way? If someone was to be accused of violating the employee ethics policy, would that end up in a dispute resolution process?
So how we have that proposed under the ethics policy would be a policy violation. So HR would take a look and investigate that policy violation. It would not be directed towards this route immediately.
Could this dispute resolution policy, could it result in some type of disciplinary action?
No, that's not the intent of it at all.
If it ends up needing to go there, then you switch it over to different policies, I guess. Not it leaves this policy and goes into a different policy, I would assume.
Yeah, the goal for this is to create that safe environment where, again, we're talking about a specific subject with each party coming with a resolution and trying to facilitate that dialogue so that it's not resulting in any type of other policy violation, if that even occurred.
If we're doing our best to add some comfort and increase morale, add some comfort to our employees that they can trust the organization, first of all, let me ask a question. How long has this been in the works?
I would say several months. I mean, it's been quite some time.
Talking about ethics or dispute resolution?
Dispute resolution policy.
Several weeks.
Several weeks?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess it's important enough to me to do it right, and I would love to see us, again, I mentioned many voices of being inclusive with our employees and directors, some of the, I think to show respect to them. It would help them know that we want to have their input. I want to do it right the first time. We've already talked about a number of changes I recommended, and you all said, yeah, those look like reasonably good changes. I don't think we're ready to adopt this today because it's not in a final format. I think we have to go ahead and take those comments, and you can run them up and down the halls and see whether or not the support for those. But I would like to see an edited, updated, clean document for us to consider for adoption. And in the process, I would like to, give the employees, invite them to weigh in, and the directors to weigh in, and the public too. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we would defer this until September the 15th.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second to defer this till September 15th. Any other comments? Being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Okay, next item, please.
Oh.
You're
Still here.
You're not the clerk.
The second policy we are going to discuss this morning is a pilot program. It's a sign-on bonus policy, and the intent is to incentivize a candidate to accept employment at Sedgwick County. Again, this is a pilot program that we are looking at for emergency communications, facilities maintenance, and for certain positions within CommCare. On the policy, you will see that there are different dollar amounts assigned to those levels within the pilot program. We are looking at, again, if someone takes employment, if this is passed, that amount would be paid in a lump sum 60 days after the successful completion of 60 days higher.
Okay.
Do you have any questions or discussion? We'd love to hear that.
I mean, I like the policy we got to keep trying to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, and keep employment. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just my first question would be, I guess I've not heard about the facilities maintenance challenges. Can someone please explain that to me a little bit more? I guess I'm not aware of.
I think Tanya could
I've heard about
speak to
911,
that.
I've heard about CommCare, I've heard about detention deputies and EMS.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Tanya Cole, Assistant County Manager. Right now in facilities maintenance, and this is particular to buildings maintenance and our trade specialists, we have 26 positions and we are down 7 positions, so we have 7 vacancies. And what we are hearing in those positions are that these folks are leaving due to higher pay in the private sector. And so we are hoping with this sign-on bonus that we can hopefully recruit some folks to these positions.
Okay, so that brings up a number of questions. So
Okay.
I don't know, what do these folks make typically? What's an average salary for one of these?
I don't know if I know that off the top of my head, and I'd hate to quote anything, but I would say somewhere between the pay of maybe $12 to $16 an hour.
I guess my perspective is I don't know that someone's going to necessarily make a significant employment decision based on $1,500 one-time bonus. And I'm concerned that this is not going to be effective. How do we know this will be an effective program? I mean, do we have some type of data that shows that this is the right amount of money? And
We won't, and this can't be the only solution to a problem. This is one solution to a larger problem. Reclassification analysis, which we went through and the commission's looking at as they adopt the budget, is critical. And a multi-year pay plan compensation model has to be looked at. Critical pay and one-time signing bonus pay, these are just tools that we use to try to shore up emergency we have today, but clearly the long-term solve of this is a larger discussion, and it has to do with base pay and things that the commissioners are wrestling with currently.
Well, Commissioner Dennis and I probably know about this a little bit because of the military background, but did you ever have an SRB bonus? You did. And I'm just curious, but what your perspective was the SRB bonus was something that was designed because there was a critical skill that was too many openings in a certain job. And an SRB bonus, which is a military bonus for signing on to another term of service or whatever, but they would give an employee a fair amount of money to stay on because they have a critical need. And so the SRB bonus was really designed, though, it was tailored towards the percentage of the number of open positions. Am I right about that? I think that's correct. So it would go up or down. Go ahead.
Yeah, SRB is Selective Reenlistment Bonus is what it stands for. And there were critical career fields within the military that were difficult to maintain at their level of readiness that you needed for the military. And so they did offer a one-time bonus on reenlistment. It was only in reenlistment time that they got that.
But that would go up and down based on how many openings they had and how critical that position was.
Right. If, for example, one of the jobs I had, now I was an officer, was never eligible for a selective reenlistment bonus because we never reenlisted. We were in forever. But the enlisted that come up every 4 years, if they're in a critical career field, depending on how critical it was, the value of that, I had, when I was a targeting officer, I had folks that were re-enlisting that worked with me were getting $5,000 re-enlistment bonus. So it was fairly substantial. And when I was overseas, a good friend of mine bought a brand new Porsche with his re-enlistment bonus. So it was something that enticed them to stay.
That was a long time ago when a Porsche cost $5,000, but just want to say that was a long time ago. I was in my career field.
You're saying I'm old.
Yeah, I am. In my world, I think the most people around me, if I had re-enlisted, I was offered an SRB of 3. I don't even know what that means now, but it was a lot of money. It was $10,000 or $20,000. It was a lot of money. But anyway, it seems to me that this is really not just these three agencies. We know. And it was already stated, we know corrections, for example, is huge problems. We know EMS still has huge problems, and I'm still asking the leadership in EMS to help me understand the best way to use $185,000, but maybe sign-on bonuses is the right way to do that as well. But in every one of these agencies, since they have such low number of staff that are filling these positions, we have salary savings, and we have budgeted positions that are unfilled. So that creates, if you will, a budget opportunity in those agencies, especially towards the end of the year when you can see the budget's performing. There's money there. Why would we not just open this up to every agency that sees higher than reasonable attrition, that it's in almost a crisis mode? Why wouldn't we not just turn that salary savings around and turn that into a bonus for other agencies like corrections, for example?
I think that's a different discussion than the actual sign-on bonus, as at a year-end bonus. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm not talking about year-end. I'm talking about using salary savings as a sign-on bonus to get folks to come back to corrections. They have too many open positions right now. We need to recruit. And same thing in EMS. We're still, I think, down 21 paramedics. We were down to 0 status just yesterday. We've solved some issues, but we haven't solved the real issue, which is we don't have enough trucks on the street. And so we've got to get some people to come back. We need some sign-on bonus money to lure some people back. So again, if there's salary savings, why are we not just rolling that money back over to?
Well, our expert has come over to talk about those funds, but we have had some of those discussions specific about certain departments. I don't know if you want to talk about.
And while Lindsay's getting the podium, let me address that. So when you talk about the concept of signing bonus, there's two components to that. First of all, there's the employee factor, which some employees see those as unfair. Incumbent employees specifically will say, I hired on here and I've been working here and I didn't get a signing bonus. This doesn't seem fair that you'd be giving this now and I didn't get it. So that's number one. And you have to work past that. You have to give the organizations a chance to work past that, which is, I think, is where we're at with EMS, to where they're having that discussion internally to determine the fairness of it. The second thing you have to ask is, can you afford it? Can you fiscally manage it? These areas that we are asking for approval today, we have analyzed and understand that we fiscally afford it. Depending on the level of success. I mean, there's some positions, a couple of these positions in ComCare where there's 47 openings. And if we get 47 people that would apply, then the numbers go up. So we would have to, that's why we want to trial run this to determine the popularity and if this even works or not. So those are the kinds of discussions that we have. And then we always look at departments. And I think maybe what I heard you say was organizationally we would look at cost savings and allow other departments to tap into that savings to pay bonuses for their area. We generally look within the departments for salary savings, which is what makes 911 as the easiest example. It's all GF funded. So you can look in there, you can see you have 23, 24 openings, and you're saving salaries over time, and we know we can afford this project. When you start looking at ComCare or corrections, which have amounts of state subsidies coming in other words, we're a conduit for those organizations to the state of Kansas, then you have to begin to look more in depth at whether you can afford it or not, or whether we can move forward with that. In fact, we have a staff meeting next Tuesday. We're going to talk specifically about the complexities of ComCare and their finances, where they have a revenue generating component, as well as some state subsidy component, as well as some general fund component. corrections is somewhat there. They're not revenue generating, but they have a number of state subsidies. So we're analyzing that area. Not to say we couldn't turn that on if commission wants us to turn that on and do it. But we would want to give that due diligence and make sure that we can afford what it is we're attempting to do there.
So a couple of observations. Once again, this is a pilot program. I would like it if there was something that would force us to come back and reanalyze this program at some point in the future. Again, I know you say it's 2 years, but there's no expiration date on this policy. It just simply, it looks like it's in perpetuity. So I wish there was a sunset that would force us to come back and analyze. I also think that the amount of money ought to be geared towards the average salary of the positions that are being need to be filled, as well as the number of days ought to be commensurate to how much money is being provided. And then also the amount of number of positions open should drive, if you will, the calculation on how much money would be included in this bonus. This to me seems a little bit arbitrary to say $1,500, $2,500, $5,000 for 60 days worth of time. I can just, to me, I don't know how these numbers were arrived, but I would like to be more calculated, I guess, in the way I would do this. And I think it should be available to every other organization. If they, again, I understand grant positions, that's complicated. But for places where we can do it, that, I think we need to talk about that. And second thing, in terms of fairness, maybe there ought to be some type of, you can't use the word retention because that doesn't make sense to me, but longevity bonuses potentially, and hit milestones in the future to encourage people to stay on longer periods of time. I think that might be something else we ought to look at in terms of a policy. But at the end of the day, I'm somewhat happy with the policy, but I think we need to expand it. And second, I do have one question on the back page here. It talks about newly hired or rehired employees are eligible for a one-time sign-on bonus per calendar year. Mm-hmm. How could this be more than one time?
So an employee might leave and be gone longer. For example, an employee might hire on in January and then leave the organization and be gone longer than 120 days and then come back to Sedgwick County. We wouldn't want to pay that sign-on bonus again in October if they came back, just as an example.
Okay, that's good to understand that. But then also talks about reinstated and transferred employees. If you have people who are in the organization now want to do a lateral transfer into some other part of the organization, they would not be eligible for this.
That's
that what
correct.
You're saying?
That's correct, because they're a current employee.
One other thing we've talked about, we've had some higher attrition since COVID began, and I understand, and I don't really understand this policy, you can explain it to me. But if someone leaves and they're gone for more than 90 days or gone for a certain period of time, they come back essentially to the bottom of the organization like a new employee. They don't get recognized for salary and vacation and things like that. Am I correct about that?
Yes, so if they're gone less than 120 days, we reinstate them at that level. They are brought back in.
In light of the challenges we're having with staff, are we able to suspend that? Is that an internal policy that we created for ourselves, or is this a
yes,
law?
And that policy has been in place for, I can't tell you how long.
Let me just say, for example, let's go back to EMS for a minute. If paramedic's been gone for a year, wants to come back, we want them. Mm-hmm. If they want to come back and we know they know our system, why would we not want to lure them back by reinstating them, giving them credit for their tenure here with Sedgwick County? I think we need to suspend that policy when we have these high levels of attrition in certain departments. I would like to see us suspend that policy and recognize their tenure. If we want them back and they want to come back, we ought to create that part, make that lure part of this discussion. Okay, so I don't know how to do that, but let me encourage the manager, please, let's have that discussion, please, at some point soon. Thank you.
Just a couple of other comments there. The intent of this policy was not to run it for 2 years. It was to run it for 60 to 90 days and then come back and report to commission on success or failure. The amounts of money that were put into this, there was a third component not mentioned. We looked at the level of specialty and formal education required to take on that position. For example, some of the comp care positions require a master's degree at state certification level, and so those numbers are higher. Some are bachelor's degree. 911, for example, basically high school education or GED. So some of also what was looked at in that was formal education and certifications needed. And then thirdly, you're exactly correct. This can't be the end of the conversation. Staff is looking at, as Commission has already championed, step pay. We have to look at our shift differential pay, which is archaic. It is decades old. We haven't increased it for decades. Our weekend pay, our holiday pay, because so much of what Sedgwick County does is 24/7 service operations, and this goes across the spectrum. And those employees, when they look around the region, are seeing higher pay in those types of issues. Longevity pay, which you brought up. All of this has to be looked at to course correct a compensation model which needs correcting. But we all know, we've talked about this, we can't do it in a single budget year. We have to do this over time, and we have to do this thoughtfully. But those are all issues which staff is talking about and will continue to talk about for the next, not even the next budget cycle, the next couple of budget cycles at least.
Commissioner Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as the title of this says, the first word is pilot. And we have to take a look where we've got some problems right now. There may be problems in a lot of other areas, but until we know if something like this works, I think selecting these areas is a great start. We can review it after 90 days or so and see if it's working. If it's not working, we can revise it, we can delete it, we can expand it. We've got all kinds of options. But until we find out if it does work, again, it's a pilot. So I would support your suggestion. Thank you.
And with that, before Commissioner Howell, I'm going to make a motion that we adopt this policy with the amendment at the end of the Section 1, the purpose area, to say, because it says in effect until rescinded by the Board of County Commissioners and will be reviewed on 6-month anniversary of the date of this implementation. That'll be my motion. Anything could happen 60, 90 days, in my opinion, but this will force us to look at it in 6 months, is what my intent is. And that's been seconded. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. I would support that amendment. That makes good sense. I don't know if it's appropriate to do this or not, but I would love to push the idea of moving EMS and corrections into this discussion. I'm fine with these three. I support the resolution as it's written, but I think we need to do something for corrections and EMS. We are in critical status right now, crisis status, in both of these departments. We did some extraordinary things for our jail deputies. We're dealing with 3 departments here, but we can't ignore the fact that we've got 2 other crises that are screaming for our attention. Why we would not include them today in this policy, I don't understand, Mr. Manager.
Commissioner, I feel pretty good about doing that with corrections because I know where Glenda stands on that. I would like to talk to Director Lannerman about his thoughts on that and make sure that the first part of the 2 issues that we discussed before, which is employee acceptance of this, to hear from employees of whether they accept this kind of policy. And then I know we have the money in the EMS budget. That's not the issue, but I would want to check with Director Lannerman to make sure that from a personnel standpoint, he's comfortable with that.
If I was to make a substitute motion, Mr. Manager, that would say we would do exactly what Chairman said, but I would like to include corrections in this policy.
Okay.
And as well as bring back, if you will, a proposal for EMS next week. Would that be okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a substitute motion. We would adopt this policy with your amendment. In addition to, I'd like to include corrections in this policy for this sign-on bonus incentive immediately. And I'd like to ask Mr. Manager to work with our EMS department to bring a proposal back for EMS next week. Thank you, Chairman.
I'll second that.
Okay, been a substitute motion and a second. I have a quick question on that. My memory gets confused about some of this. Didn't we do some emergency pay relief for EMS?
Yes. We've done critical pay, Chairman.
So this would be on, we bring back another bonus, this would be on top of the critical pay that you've already done.
That critical pay is for incumbent employees who are working. This is clearly a recruiting strategy. So, but yes, to answer your question. And then Lindsay just whispered in my ear, we have budget next week. If it's up to the commission, we were going to try to singularly focus on budget, but if we want to bring this back, we could, if that's okay with commission, we would be glad to do that. That's what I'm bringing to your attention. Next week is budget week. So.
Okay. Couple questions. Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you. Can you just clarify who else is receiving critical pay? not just
I'll
EMS.
try here. EMS, the dispatchers and call takers. Two facets of comm care, therapists and caseworkers. Many facets in corrections, ISOs, to have Rusty help me out. And we're actually taking a relook at corrections to maybe expand that into some other areas.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't, if we were going to look at who could be on this, that it wasn't just EMS, that these other groups that we're looking at are part of that as well, so.
The only group that's not part of critical pay yet, which we're still analyzing, is the maintenance workers, but Tanya has made a request to do that, and we are crunching the numbers on that to look at finances, but they are not on critical pay yet, but probably soon will be, and I will notify you all when that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dennis?
Well, thank you. Well, I guess I'm kind of concerned with, again, making sausage from the bench and start adding things at the last minute where that we haven't had them staffed. I understand we've got some concerns in corrections. Where are we at on EMS? How many have come back after that Dr. Gallagher left?
I don't know that we have.
I don't have that information handy. We could get that for you.
Rusty, do you know? We checked with, when I checked with Director Lannerman last, which was a week or so ago, we hadn't had any come back yet. But that could be, that changes daily, so.
Rusty Lees, Assistant County Manager. I was meeting with Director Lannerman and his staff yesterday. As of right now, they've made no new hires since we transitioned to an interim director.
Okay, can you give us a weekly update on how many have come back of our previous EMS employees as a result of our change that we made recently?
I can update
That
you.
was one of the big issues around the change, though I'd like to keep up to speed. But anyway, again, I hate to make sausage from the bench. I make a substitute to the substitute motion that we defer this until next week so that staff can fully take a look at this additional proposal.
Commissioner Dennis, again, I don't think very much is on next week's agenda other than budget. I think there's one small contract. You may want to do it in the first meeting of September.
Very good. I'll make a substitute to the substitute motion that we defer it until the first meeting in September.
Okay, I'll second that. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of points. Are we not able to take up other regular business next week?
Yeah, you can take, it's an open meeting.
I guess I don't know why we would wait. It seems like this is an urgent issue. And I would be fine doing at least these three today and potentially the other two later, but I don't want to put it off. I mean, to me, even putting these off for a week is troublesome to me, and certainly putting it off till next month is really troublesome. So I don't know that I like the motion currently, and I think we could do this next week, but
Well, that's kind of why that's why I made my original motion, was so we could get this ball rolling and then we can change and add.
Well, Mr. Manager, let me ask a question. The issue with corrections, is it easy or is it complicated? Is there challenges there that we need to take a week or two or three to solve, adding them to this resolution?
I would.
Can I answer that as well? I think we need to look at specifics. When you made your motion, it included all of corrections, and I don't necessarily know if that would be the best intent for this. If we needed to identify certain positions within the department that we need to look at.
All right. If it would, let me make one comment, and I'll throw out another idea. First of all, how many? This might be for Mr. Leeds. How many people have left our EMS organization in the last couple of weeks? Anybody know?
I don't believe I'll let Rusty trump me on this, but I don't believe we've had any leave.
Yeah, that's my point. So we were seeing a pretty high attrition, and it was regular. It was every few days we were seeing people leave. So we have effectively stopped the train of attrition. So I'm very proud of all of us for doing that, but this idea that we haven't lured them back yet, again, they're cautiously optimistic. They're watching Sedgwick County. They're looking at the pay. They're looking at the policies. They're looking at seeing they're looking at Dr. Brinkman to make sure that they're happy with who's been placed in that position and all that goes. They're cautiously optimistic. I think it's going to take some time to get the trust back and lure them back, but pay has got to be part of that. So I would be fine with suspending the issue of corrections until next week. And let's do this during budget day. Let's bring back EMS and corrections next week. Let's pass the 3 today. With the amendment that the chairman made, I would like to make a substitute to the substitute, if we can do that, to pass this policy with the amendment to review this in six months. But let's bring back EMS and corrections next week.
And Commissioner Howell, for clarifications, you would like us to look at those specific positions within both those departments that are in critical need?
That's right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, all we have to do is go back to the original motion. I will withdraw my substitute to the substitute if Commissioner Howell will withdraw his substitute motion, and all we've got to do is go back to the original and ask staff to come up with something to suggest to us next week or the week after. I think that's the simplest solution rather than all these substitute motions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I would agree with that, but I do have one final comment, and I would be glad to vote on that, or second the motion.
Okay. You have one final comment?
Yeah, I do. Just want to be clear, when we talked about...
And it's final. Is this the
yeah,
final?
Yeah, this is my final comment, believe it or not. Well, unless you change things. But
okay,
when we talk about the critical pay, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Manager, but I don't think our EMTs got the critical pay. They were excluded from that.
That's correct. Critical
So
pay.
let's not miss the point that they are critical, but they never got the critical pay. I don't know that we shouldn't be broad brush and not make that clarification. So I'm very concerned about them as well. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would second the motion just to pass it as is, and let's bring back those other 2 next week. Thank you.
Like Commissioner Cruz?
No,
Yeah.
fine.
Okay. Yeah. So are we good? All the substitute motions have been withdrawn, and we
All
go
the
back to
substitute motions have been withdrawn. We could reread the original motion. It'd probably be very helpful.
the reread is to pass as presented at the end of Section 1, that the commission is mandated to review this policy at a minimum within 6 months. And that was
seconded.
seconded. We're all, okay. I don't see any other comments. Any others? Okay. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner?
Aye. Sheena, thanks for all your work, and the staff that helps, whoever else is helping you, please extend our thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item F, report of the Board of Bids and Contracts regular meeting on August 12, 2021.
Morning, Joe. Wait, that's not Joe.
Not today.
I'm so,
Josh.
kind of like when I said Madam Clerk to Josh last week. I get a habit.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Josh Lauber, Senior Buyer with Purchasing Department. The meeting of the Board and Bids and Contracts held on August 12th, 2021 resulted in 2 items for your consideration today. Item number 1, contract amendment to QLIS Incorporated for the Treasurer's Office. The recommendation is to accept the amendment to extend the contract with QLIS Incorporated through September 23rd, 2026. Item number 2, Stryker LifePak and Lucas Service Plan for Emergency Medical Services. The recommendation is to accept the quote from Stryker Sales Corporation for the contracted rates listed above. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have, and I recommend approval of these 2 items.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Commissioner Howell.
Just have one question. Thank you, Chairman. I'm curious on the QLIS. Is this a county-funded QLIS program, or is this paid out of the revenues from the Treasurer's Office that they take from operations?
You are correct. I do believe we have Randy Barkdale with the Treasurer's Office that can speak to that.
Okay.
Right.
Randy, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
And did you hear the question?
Did you hear the...
The recommendation is to accept the quote from Stryker Sales Corporation for the contract. I'm watching on KPTS, so I must be behind on the question.
Tell him to turn his TV off.
Commissioner, how could you receive the question?
If he can hear me, yes. I was just curious about the appropriation for the QLIS system. Is this something that's paid for out of county funds, like property tax funds, or is this paid for through revenues that are generated by the office through user fee, through tag fees and operations that they collect on behalf of the state.
Randy Barkdale with the Treasurer's Office. Commissioner Howell, it's paid for out of the technology fund, so it is not a general fund expenditure.
Does that mean this comes out of state revenues?
Technology fund.
Randy, is that state revenues? Does technology fund come from state revenues?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. No more questions. Make a motion to approve the Board of Bids as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other questions? Being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item, please.
Consent agenda.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tom Stills, County Manager's Office. Recommend approval of consent items G through M this morning.
Commission, you have items G, consent items G through M. Does anybody have any questions or pull one for further discussion? I don't see any, so I'll make a motion to approve items G through M.
Second.
Motion and a second. Being no further questions, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner?
Aye. Next item, please.
Committee reports.
Commissioners, do you have any committees to report? Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Howell, Register of Deeds Tanya Buckingham and her staff and I had an opportunity on Monday night to meet up in Valley Center because they're bringing in the Vietnam moving wall, October 21st to the 25th. I know it's in Commissioner Cruz's district, but it's very important to us because we're military. So I appreciate the fact that they're working on that. They're going to have thousands of people they expect each day. They've got a couple ceremonies set up, but the main thing is it brings the moving wall for the folks here in Sedgwick County to be able to see the Vietnam Memorial when they probably won't have great opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. to see the original wall that's there. As a person that entered the military during the Vietnam War, it has impacted everyone's life that it ever touched, just as I'm sure that the wars that are going on now are going to impact every military and their families' lives from this point forward. So it's kind of a way to heal. It's a way to recognize the sacrifices of the men and women that served during the Vietnam War. And it's a way to recognize almost 60,000 individuals that names are on that wall. So I just want to make sure that everybody marks their calendar for October the 21st to the 25th to go up to Valley Center and have an opportunity to view the wall in person. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks for that update. Commissioner Cruz.
They're also looking for volunteers. So if you'd like to volunteer, please shoot me an email at lacy.cruz@sedgwick.gov and I can hook you up so that you can volunteer.
Okay. And I hope, I think they're trying to make sure they can get the escort from that morning. I hope that's being worked out. I've tried to help navigate or get them connected with the city to get that done. So I haven't heard back, but we'll monitor that as well. Yep.
I can give you a little bit of an update. The committee tried to work with the city of Wichita, but it was going to cost them upwards of $6,000, as I recall from hearing the meeting.
Wow.
For the city of Wichita to help them with the parade, so that they've dropped any part of the parade in the city of Wichita. They're going to start the parade over at Hartman Arena and then move over to the park there in Valley Center. So they will not be requiring any support from the city of Wichita.
Good. Well, that's might be an easier parade anyway from Hartman Arena over there.
Yeah.
That's
and
good.
they're going to have 250 motorcycles in the parade, and it's just an easier route for them. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for update. Any other committee comments? Commissioner Howell.
Just on that, I appreciate Commissioner Cruz's comments, but in addition to volunteers, they also need money. They're not fully funded yet. So if anybody has money they want to support this moving wall, they would love to have some help with that. And then I don't know if it's appropriate right now, Commissioner Dennis or not, but we did talk about potentially a couple of connections to the county in terms of PPE. And I think that if we have if we can do it, and sometimes at some of these types of events, I'm thinking about, for example, the event that happened just a couple months ago down on Broadway, I believe. The fire trucks did come out and hang the flag over the street type of thing. So if we can do anything like that, that would be very welcome to them. But the PPE, they would potentially have, I think, 10,000 or even more visitors to this site over that few-day period. And so if we have sanitizer or masks that we can provide, possibly an immunization site, if you guys wanted to put that out there. And I know that Tanya is talking about doing a DD Form 214 registration and discount card processing there. So again, we already have a small footprint, but we can maybe even expand that just a little bit. It might be an option for us.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Dennis did talk with me yesterday about the PPEs and the vaccine potential. We have staff working on that. I'll talk with Mr. Leeds and Chief Williams about the fire truck, and then talk with Tanya Buckingham as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else under under the committee reports or other? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
And also, because we didn't take action on, would be no fire.
I think you still need to go through the motions of recessing into the fire district and then taking the same action you took on the regular meeting, Chairman. I mean, we did publish an agenda for a fire district meeting, so.
Okay, all right, thanks for the guidance.
I think
Yeah.
she had another.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that our hospital's inpatient COVID numbers are steadily rising. So they've asked us to change the dashboard instead of being in yellow status to go to red. And they're also going to be starting to limit visitors to one again because of the numbers in our hospitals. So as stated at the beginning of this meeting, the Sedgwick County Health Department is offering the booster shot for Pfizer vaccine. If you had the Moderna vaccine, you'll have to go to another organization that provides that one. So Walgreens, Walmart, Costco, any of those have the Moderna one. So I would just continue to highly encourage everybody to be vaccinated. And if you are, part of that immunocompromised or severely immunocompromised group, you can get your booster vaccine now. Thank you.
Okay. And Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you. To follow up on vaccines and just the whole health discussion, I received a call yesterday from a constituent wondering about how the schools and KDHE are reporting absences or positive tests or children out of school. How are we as a health department collecting that data or creating an opportunity for all school districts to give us their data as far as how many students are impacted by COVID? And I should have brought this up earlier, but I forgot, so now we're addressing it. Thank you.
Commissioners, the health department has a reporting protocol for schools. There's a portal that they go in and report absences that are related to reportable diseases. Not every absence gets reported, of course, but if the school can identify that it's tied to a specific reportable disease, they report that on the dashboard, or they report that to disease investigation, and they monitor and track that. And disease investigation staff monitor emergency room information, the types of things that are going on in the emergency, so that they know when things are changing in our community. We don't generally report that unless there are risks to the community. We can talk to the health department about a way to work with the schools to see if it's appropriate to make that more available.
So how do we plan to do that? Do we plan to have, because I've already received questions about what are the school reports this week. I mean, just driving to school this morning with my daughter, she was in tears because less kids are wearing masks. I mean, she's concerned about it. She's 12. So I wonder how are we going to communicate that information to our community?
We'll have
What's happening in our schools specifically?
We'll have to have an internal discussion about the best way to do that, and we'll also have to engage the school districts. It's their information as well. It may be more appropriate that the school districts report that information. We'll have to talk to our constituents before we take any action.
So as a whole community, though, as the Sedgwick County Health Department, they are able to come and report that to us. It's just a voluntary basis at the moment. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay. So is there a way that we could reiterate that reporting function for those who might need a reminder about how to report?
We can certainly have staff send out an email to all their contacts in the schools.
Okay, I think that's all the questions regarding that. I do have one follow-up fun event this weekend. Second Chance Bail Bonds is holding a Heart of the City event. It is being held Saturday, August 21st at 705 North Broadway from 12 to 8. There will be a plethora of resources, multiple ministries, local businesses, locking arms in the heart of our city. They'll have DJ Supernatural. On the 1 and 2s, free haircuts will be provided. There's a lot of things going on. Free backpacks, school supplies, Paxton's Blessings box will be there giving out hygiene products. There will also be lowriders for everyone to check out. Northbound Inc. will also be partnering with Cancel to bless 5 people with fully paid scholarships to get their high school diploma. You'll have a chance to dunk a bail bondsman. That'll be kind of fun in the dunk tank to help raise money for ministries for the front lines every day. They'll be raffling off a few items as well as doing giveaways, and then a free concert will be at the end from 5 to 8. So again, that is the Heart of Our City celebration this Saturday, August 21st at 705 North Broadway. It'll be going on from 12 to 8 p.m.
Okay.
I have one more quick thing. I'm sorry that I didn't
Commissioner
mention.
Lopez.
Can we start having an internal conversation about just the refugees from Afghanistan to see what that could look like? Because I'm assuming that will eventually affect Sedgwick County, and so if we could get a plan started before that happens, I think that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to highlight another event that's happening in my district down south in Mulvane. This is the Old Settlers Day weekend. And if you don't know what Old Settlers Day is, it's a huge celebration of the community. It's fully up this year, but if you're interested in that, they have everything from car shows to a parade and all kinds of evening events, amusement rides and things like that. But the place to go to learn more about this is officialmulvaneoldsettlers.com. Officialmulvaneoldsettlers.com. And you can read all about, I would say there's about 24 different things on the schedule between Friday and Saturday this weekend. So I think it's a great opportunity for people in the community that want to get out and do something fun this weekend. This is a great opportunity. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. I know Mr. Papoon was looking for something to do this weekend, so there you go. Okay, with that, we will close the other, and we need to recess and go into the Board of Fire District Number 1. Madam Clerk.
Roll call. Commissioner Lopez? Present. Commissioner Dennis?
Present.
Commissioner Howell?
Present.
Commissioner Cruz?
Present.
Chairman Meitzner?
Present. Next item, please.
Public agenda.
We didn't have any comments from public agenda, so we will close public agenda. The next item, please.
Consideration of minutes. Item A, fire meeting minutes of July 14th, 2021.
Okay, Commissioners, you had a chance to review the minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
And I'll have a second. So, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz,
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Next item, please.
Item B, fire meeting minutes on June 23rd, 2021.
Okay, Commissioners, we have those minutes to approve. Is there any questions or comments? Being none, make a motion to approve the minutes. Motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Next item, please.
Consent agenda.
Yeah, Commissioners, Tom Stolz, County Manager, recommend deferring consent item C for the same deferral period we did for the policy under the main agenda. So I think it's 30 days, correct?
September 15th.
September 15th.
Okay. A motion to defer the consent agenda till September 15th. Motion and a second. Any other questions? Being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. And Madam Clerk, next item.
Executive session.
Okay, so are we, we'll adjourn the fire agenda or fire meeting and come back to the regular meeting? So if there's anything other on the fire agenda, I don't see any, so we will adjourn the fire agenda, return from the recess to the regular meeting. Madam Clerk,
Executive session.
executive session. Commissioner Cruz.
I move that the Board of County Commissioners recess into executive session for 20 minutes until 11:40 for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel on the subject of personnel issues relating to an upper management employee, and that the Board of County Commissioners returns to this room from executive session at 11:40.
I'll second that. I don't see any questions. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. So we will adjourn or recess for 20 minutes into executive session. We'll go back into the boardroom so the media can stay and around. Okay, welcome back to the public for our commission meeting. We've returned from executive session, no action taken. So is there any other information or action from the board? If not, we will adjourn the Wednesday, August 18th meeting. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Tell Josh we miss him.
I will.
Not as much as you.